The mixer currently has this attachment. I need to remove it because I'm using this attachment instead. We've acquired this nice fancy dolly now, which is neat. So I can just move this bowl around, keep it on the ground. Just gonna give this bucket a quick sanitizing before we put ingredients into it. Other one was done before we started. So this time of year, the tap water here is in the mid-60s Fahrenheit. Of course, we have it running through a filter, although it's still coming in like at the temperature that it comes in the tap, so it's nice and chilly. We're going into a planetary mixer next with this bowl, and so that's why we're using cold water. The planetary mixer is a lot more aggressive in terms of the friction in the bowl that's happening as the dough is developing, and so the temperature is going to climb to temp, whereas in the other one we are preventing it from, like, it's a constant battle of temperature loss. So I need 14 liters of water here. I'm going to re-tare my scale because it was no longer giving me a reading. I've got 15.7, so I'm just going to take away to the point that we need to. Perfect. And now I'm going to take this water and put it right in this bowl. From there, we're going to do the flour. And I need almost this entire bag of flour. It's just shy. So I have a rolly bucket here that accepts this flour. In other words, the flour in that rolly bucket is the same as the flour in the bag. So I know the weight of the bag, which is 22,680, and the amount that I need is 2553. So I'm going to put that in, subtract it. So I need to take away 2127. I'm going to grab my dry ingredient bucket, tare it, measure out 2127. You can be as precise as you want to the gram. At the end of the day, the gram here and there at this batch size is not going to make that big of a difference, but I'm going to take this excess and dump it in with the rest of the main flour here. Put that away. Now, what I have left in this bag is what's going into the autolyse for this mix. So I can dump the rest of this in. It's really nice to have this on wheels. You get to sort of just pivot it up. Going on speed 1 here. And again, our goal here is to just get the incorporation going. Right now, we are mixing just flour and water together to a shaggy degree. So meaning we shouldn't see any clumps of flour. We shouldn't see any kind of cubes of flour surrounded by pockets of hydration. You should see dough, and that's about it. So it only really takes a couple minutes to get to that state. You can see that by the second, there's less and less flour that's visible on the surface, and that will just become more evident over the next couple minutes. This one now is fully incorporated. You can see that. If I go much further than this, gluten will actually start to develop, and that's actually fine, but we can allow time to do this a little bit better for us. Because we're going gentle now and allowing time to build this gluten, by the time we work on it on the table, we're sort of teasing out to the peak of gluten development. That's where the loaves are sort of at their strongest. We shape them, make them into bread, and now it's going to ferment for a long extended period in the fridge at a lower temperature and weaken throughout that period of time. Now the gluten is already peaked out in its development, and it's starting its slow process in the fridge of degradation. Degradation in this case is positive for digestibility, because imagine how tough bread is when it's first coming together, how strong that dough is. You're essentially eating it as it's sort of weakening in its structure and strength, and so it's broken down for your body to break it down even further. Whereas when bread is made with yeast in a fast manner, by the time it's coming out of the oven, that's like the cycle of gluten development where it's at its strongest point. So this is theoretical. I haven't actually done the sort of scientific study to confirm these sort of hypotheses that I have, but I think that that's part of it. I think it's related to some of the other research out there. If I had to sort of study it, that's what I would be looking at or researching to see who else has already done that. Because this loaf is an inclusion loaf, meaning it has things inside of it other than flour, water, and salt. In this case, it's gochujang paste, which is fermented Korean red chili. It's often found in Asian markets if you're here in the US, or it's a pretty common ingredient in Korean food. It's not very common to combine it with roasted garlic and green onions, but we tested this flavor combination a while back in bread, and it's really good. We made a grilled cheese with it the other night with mozzarella, and that's gonna have to become a thing at some point. So I'm gonna add Harriet. I need 4.9 liters, just shy of 5 liters. So in this case, I'll tare an empty bucket at 0 and get myself all the way there with a pour. Harriet kind of comes out in these large chunks, and you got to be aware of that when working in larger volumes, that every time you incorporate Harriet, you're going to get quite a bit all at once. I've gotten somewhat proficient at judging those smaller amounts, smaller blob amounts based on what my scale is reading. I suppose that's the gains of the first few years of learning how to bake, when you're just doing this over and over. There really is no substitute for repetition. You can study a recipe, study a YouTube video, but it will still require input of time and effort to develop the proficiency of baking regularly. I love this little dolly on my Hobart, because now when it's time to drop the bowl, making sure it's not attached to anything, I'm going to drop it all the way down. It's going to end up on the dolly, and I can bring it into a position where it's far easier for me to work on it. Of course, I should probably loosen the hook. So I'm just going to bring the hook with me, just to sort of demonstrate the power of an auto lease. This dough is not developed very much. You all saw that. And now look at how strong it already is. It's been, I'm not looking exactly at the time because I'm talking a lot, so I know that enough time is passing by. But I know it's been over 20 minutes, but it's been well under an hour. I think we're probably closer to 30 minutes at this point. So I've got Harriet measured out, nice and bubbly. What's odd is, we're making this gochujang sourdough, and at this stage you might be wondering, well, it looks exactly like all the other doughs that you make, and that's actually quite accurate. It is pretty much exactly like all the other doughs that we make right now, although the formula is a little different. We did not include the addition of that extra flour. We're not doing the bassonage, but we're still taking this base dough to a certain level, and we're going to incorporate all of the extras, the gochujang paste, the green onions, and the roasted garlic when the dough is already in bins. at a different point, basically. So now we're just worried about the base dough, the base bread. And so I need to get salt going in here. And again, I'm putting the salt right on top of the starter, but it's very temporary. So I didn't do any kind of smiley face in this instance. And we're going to wheel it back. So now I'm incorporating this sourdough starter into this dough. With this mixer, we are starting on a very gentle setting, and then we are going to develop the gluten and stretch the dough out and bring it to completion on the second gear, which will create more friction in the bowl and let the temperature of the dough climb to our desired finishing temperature. How do I know the moment to switch to second speed? That's based on what I'm observing in the dough. So right now, what I am observing is that it's still pretty shaggy. I can still see raw ingredients. So I can still see starter kind of layered into the dough, barely. We're kind of getting close to the point that I want to switch gears right now. So the smoother the dough looks, the more it can just go into that high speed of developing strength and building temperature, and that's right now. So I'm going to bring the mixer to a complete stop. This is a complete stop you really want to heed because you don't want to break your mixer, and it doesn't take a police officer to pull you over here. Like, the mixer will just break, you'll have a repair bill. We're going to go in second speed. You can see like the relationship with the dough is a little bit different. It's almost like the mixer is throwing the dough up against the walls, and it's sort of bouncing around, creating some friction, and it's developing strength. This dough is probably going to get a little bit further in its development than that one did. That is good because we are incorporating a bunch of extra stuff in it. So its stiffer, stronger start will allow us to sort of weaken it again and tease in all of these inclusions by hand as we go along. So it's going to do its thing for another couple minutes. Meanwhile, we can clean up here and move on. So now we're seeing just the most gorgeous dough. I mean, I don't know how you could think otherwise. It looks perfectly smooth, super strong. This is just flour, water, and our proof blend, and you can see like it's passing that window pane test with flying colors. You can really expand it before it starts to come apart. So I'm going to drop the bowl here. First, I need to release it so that it jumps off onto my dolly. I'm going to release this guy as well. Okay. First, I'm going to remove my dough hook, and I'm kind of twisting it out. It's pretty clean coming out. In this case, I'm making 16 loaf bins. I'm making 60 total loaves, and I need to figure out what my scaling weight is of just the raw dough so I can put in all the other inclusions. So I looked at the total dough weight of my formula, which was, I think, 47 kilos, and subtracted the stuff that's not in the dough yet. So that is the gochujang, the roasted garlic, the green onions by weight. And I got another number. I divided by the total number of loaves that I'm making, which is 60, and that gave me the amount by weight of just dough without all those extras for one loaf. Then I multiplied that by 16 to figure out how much dough goes into each of these bins, because once again, we scale to bins of 16 loaves at a time. So we're going to then add the right amount of all three of those things into the bin itself. I'm going to 10,740. Right now I'm at 2735. 10,740 is the number to remember today. 7,800 at the end. So this one's kind of an oddball out. I'm gonna have to do a little math to figure that one out. These three will be the same. I've got this bowl now to clean up. I'm gonna reset this equipment, and then we can move on to managing all those things. My job now is to figure out again how much of each of the extra ingredients that I need to put in I'm going to do. I'm going to get that ready. I will start though by calculating what's going into each one of these bins. Gochujang being the first one, the total amount is 4110. Now I'm dividing that by 60 total loaves and timesing by 16, which is in these bins. So I need 1,096 grams of gochujang paste in each one of these. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and add the 548 garlic to this bin, and then I'm going to add the green onions, 300. Seems like I'm going to have a pretty close to perfect amount, really, which is all of this should be in theory. Okay, so now I have 4 bins. My job is to actually incorporate all these ingredients now. So of course it's not done just by dumping all this on top of the dough. We have to spread it out. So my first step in this is going to be to just even out the ingredients I'm adding in this top layer, which with gochujang and its kind of pasty consistency, it's kind of interesting. So just mixing this all together and getting it all incorporated as an inclusion together and as a top layer. It's not fully incorporated yet. Now we have to go through the next step of that, which is to dimple it all in like I always do. But I'm going to do this in a batch, so I'm going to get the second one going before I return to the first. So I'm really doing one type of action right now, which is just mixing all these sort of ingredients together on top of this dough and spreading them out evenly. So I'm sort of checking to see where that gochujang paste is and moving it about so that it is more consistently spread and I don't have an area where it's just all gochujang. It's much easier to work with the gochujang paste when it's just fresh with an open container that's, you know, still shelf stable. Once you have to refrigerate it, the paste hardens and it makes it a little bit trickier to work with, not to mention it's going to cool the dough when it's refrigerated, and typically not something I'm trying to actively do. Wondering why all these loaves have an added cost. Well, this is it. Like, you got to spend the time to do this little extra work, but it creates really cool flavors. This combination is just a fun one. Just dimpling all this in until I can no longer sort of spread the stuff that's going into the dough around on the top layer, meaning until it's sort of inside the dough, creating all kinds of like little pockets and getting spread in there. So you can see that slowly the mass is changing colors from its neighbor, which is still showing on the very red on top. This one's getting lighter and lighter by the second because more of that material is winding up on the inside. The resulting loaf here, the gochujang loaf, has almost a red, like a fiery red orange crumb when it's fully done. It's beautiful. So I like this layer of inclusion, meaning like I like the consistency now of what I see on the top of the dough versus the dough itself. So this is time now to start folding. So I'm going to fold it onto itself. So now there's a sandwich of inclusion on the inside. And you can start seeing clean dough on the outside. I'm going to seal that sandwich up. So now all this stuff's on the inside. And it should be pretty safe to fold about now and create more layering of the inclusion. So now I'm going to grab it, fold it in half again. So now 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of inclusion through the dough. See if I can get one more in, or if I'm being greedy. I'm being greedy. The dough doesn't want to go anymore, so I've stretched it to the extent that I can. Now the right thing to do is to throw a lid on it once I'm done with the rest of the bins and move back to the second round of folding in about 30-40 minutes. So now it will be on the same cycle as all the other bread in here. From here on out, once you've done this work, the rest of the work involved with bringing this bread to life versus a bread that doesn't have the inclusions is relatively similar. So now I'm just going to handle these bins with care and keep stretching and folding them through their various stretches and folds. But I've done the active work of working in the additions, and these will now become the loaves that I want them to become. You just sort of know when the right moment is to stop dimpling and moving into folding. And it's often times when you sort of spread your hand around the top of this mass and the ingredients on the inside are moving around with you all over the place. So they're more embedded in the dough that you're working on than all on the surface. That's a good indicator that you can take the dough and fold it on itself and go through the first set of folds while still further incorporating all these ingredients. Every time you do a fold, you're doubling the amount of layers in the overall dough mass. And so if these ingredients are currently in just a standard sandwich, 3 layers, dough, inclusion, dough, so, or let's just call it 1 layer of inclusion. So now 1 layer of inclusion becomes 2, and I'm going to straighten this out. 2 layers of inclusion become 4. 4 layers of inclusion become 8. And that's all I've got for this first round of folding before one could argue that I'm getting greedy. Now these, I can just feel this. They're a little bit too cold going into their bulk fermentation. They're going to be fine temperature-wise, meaning they're still at a temperature that they're going to be fermenting actively, but I really don't want them to cool anymore in this space, and this space will keep them moving downward in temperature, not upward. But I suspect by the feel of this that they need to go the other direction. So when I'm done with these bins, instead of putting them on the room temperature rack, I'm actually going to keep them open, exposed to humidity, and then in the proofing room. Now I just have to revisit this dough a few more times for just a couple minutes. So a lot of my active work on this batch is really kind of coming to an end. The rest of it sort of gets easier from here. So this extra gochujang I'll just sort of spread across the top, knowing that on my next set of folds it will incorporate. And I'm going to throw these into our temperature controlled proofing room, which is at that 84 degrees. A really perfect environment for all of this to continue along. And it's humid in there, so the fact that the lids are off is fine too, because The humidity is keeping the dough nice and moist on the surface. Each time that I address this batch now, the layering becomes smoother. So it's going to take all 3 rounds of folding, because of the inclusion, to sort of feel as good about this dough as we do about the sourdough in terms of the evenness of the inclusion. With each set of folds, we'll sort of correct and get closer to the final hole. And I might even take it a 4th round of folding, which I can. If I don't like where I'm at after 3, there's no hard rule that says I shouldn't add a 4th. So, you know, I say that it's 3 rounds of folding, and that's the general rule, but ultimately the dough is going to guide the final result. So if it requires a 4th, it requires a 4th. I'll know that based on how it feels to me when I come back to it in about 40 minutes for that last set of folds. I can definitely tell that the time in the fridge was the right call. You know, we started this dough a little bit cold, if you recall, and we sort of mitigated that by putting it in the proofing room where the nice warm temperatures allowed this dough in the bins to warm up and create nice fermentation. So now the 2 doughs, the sourdough and the gochujang, are feeling a similar temperature. Yep, still finding just places where the inclusions need a little bit more work. And that's what's nice about the 3-step folding as well, is when you're working with the sort of complicated set of additions, it doesn't always work out that you can incorporate all this stuff evenly right away. But when you spread it out over a couple hours, by the end, you've got some pretty smooth looking, very well layered dough, even though it started with all this sort of complex additions. Final piece of the night is these 4 remaining bins of the gochujang sourdough. So we're going to divide them, and this bread in general is going to come out messier looking than the base sourdough did. That's okay. So, you know, be understanding with yourselves that this is a different bread altogether. It's not going to have the same sort of cleanliness to it in terms of everything just feeling very smooth and being very smooth. But the final result's still going to be very nice. Some of these are significantly harder to shape than others, depending on how these layers all came together. There's a lot going on in this bread, and so we have to sort of go in with that extra layer of understanding. And I'm making sure that I don't end up accidentally dividing my hand batch, which is quite large in this case. It's barely smaller than a regular batch by a few loaves. And you might get a couple uglier loaves in this type of bread. I think that is to be expected. Out of 60, that you'll have a couple that are layered a little bit worse. Overall, like, that's a weird blob of God knows what. It's going to take all of Amanda's skill set that she's accumulated to work that into something that's bread. But a lot of these look every bit as good as the sourdough did, the standard sourdough. So it's just kind of dependent on what mix of inclusion we got, how much we got in certain areas. The certain pieces of the dough mass that had more of the inclusion are a little bit, well, they're going to be really good. They just have a little bit more inclusion than the rest. They're just going to be a little harder to work out. Amanda was mentioning that sometimes when you're working with inclusions, a small piece of the dough is wet with a little bit more inclusion than all the rest. And you can usually just give it a little bit of a flour dusting to neutralize that. But nonetheless, shaping on these, very similar to some of the other shaping that you've seen us do. And I'll sort of walk through it verbally. The same type of flip. I dusted the surface with flour so that that surface that's now touching the table is still sort of loose and can be moved around. Now I folded over the top, and I'm doing the stitching where I'm going to bring one over lined up with the top, bring this piece down and have a little bit of overlap there. Then I have this bottom section, I'm folding that over, folding this over to match. This is kind of smooth, this is kind of even, and now I'm doing the tuck and roll and trying to tension as I go with the base of my thumbs and my opposing fingers. I'm rolling in the rice flour and seam side up, meaning the seam side is facing us because it's going to be turned over onto the breadboards going in the oven downward. So seam side goes up, and that's because we're going to flip out of the banneton onto the breadboards and slide into the oven. So that will actually become the bottom side of the loaf with intention. Your pretty side is the side that goes down and then gets formed around all the ridges in your bannetons. So everybody who's sort of wondering why artisan loaves have the ridges in them, it's the shape of the bannetons and the effect of the bannetons after 12 hours of cold proofing in them, or whatever the final time ends up for everybody. So now I'm scaling these a little bit smaller than the sourdough. We tend to scale our specialty loaves 100 grams smaller, and oftentimes it's just because we found that our customers enjoy that size a little bit better. It's a specialty loaf. It doesn't have as many versatile uses as, you know, the base loaf of bread, so helps us keep these breads also just that much more affordable, considering they take so much more input, both in actual ingredient costs, but you can see, you know, all along the way of doing this bread alongside doing our standard sourdough, every step of the way is just more complex. Now on the table we're dealing with, well, frankly, a giant mess of gochujang that we have to deal with afterwards. So we'll still be dealing with gochujang 30 minutes after all this bread is already put away. Whereas with the sourdough, it's, you know, not like that. So all of that sort of has to get accounted for, and we try to make these things only, you know, still reasonable in cost, while giving everybody a chance to try all these creative flavors. So now these loaves that I just hand scaled, I'm going to pre-round them. You can take a look at the difference between the pre-shaped manual loaf and the pre-shaped divider loaf. With the inclusions, it's clear that I could get a much tauter overall finish and smoother finish with my manual pre-shaping. The pre-shaping that I'm doing is one of the most important pieces when you have a mess in front of you of dough, because it brings it all together as one whole, and then as you're shaping one nice solid piece of dough that is actually together, instead of shaping a bunch of small little pieces that are flying all over the place. Now we're going to find the stuff that we're going to bake. So I'm going to go back into the walk-in cooler and find it. We have some gochujang coming out right here. Just moving things about at this point because I don't really want to take any more bread into the oven room than I need to. First tray of gochujang. Turn these loaves over. And at this stage, I always like to get a feel of what I'm dealing with, how far along the fermentation is. I'd say overall, These loaves are still fairly young, perhaps a little bit younger than I'd like them to be. They're within the acceptable range to bake, but they could definitely be fermenting a little bit longer, or have perhaps gotten a little bit more temperature in the bulk. I can tell all these things just by the size that they are at this stage and the various shape that they are. The gochujang really has such striking features all on its own that the scoring is quite simple. You've probably seen some of the complex scoring that we'll do on loaves, but when you have this beautiful color in the bread, it really doesn't require much. So we like to do this S-shaped score for specials. I'm pretty sure I just did it backwards, but that's okay. Versus what everybody else does. So this S comes out cool in the oven. So I'm working on dough that was made earlier in the day. It's not the same dough that we've been mixing together over the past couple hours. This dough was made on a separate shift and was already through its bulk fermentation, the shaping, and now it was in its final cold proof state, getting ready for the oven. And so this dough's in a different state. The dough that we're working on actively that still is not in loaf form, it's on its way. It still is in its bulk form, and so these doughs are just in two different areas. Right now we have some small maintenance issues that we haven't gotten a chance to address recently, like light bulbs in the oven. So you're not going to get to see in here once it's going in there because there's no light on this deck right now, but that doesn't mean that we can't bake on it. There's a special type of light bulb that goes into these ovens that is okay with the crazy temperature of the oven, and I haven't had a chance to order that. You can hear the steam as I inject steam into the bake. So this is a quick steam release. I'm going to open up my damper, open up the door, move out of the way so that the steam can release, and then reset the timer to, I like 9 minutes. And normally when the light is on, I can just take a peek inside and know exactly where I'm at, but it's harder to see when it's dark, so I'm going to just grab one of these out gently and see where we're at. As I sort of expected, fermentation's a little bit young on these, so these are baking a little bit under, but within range. I can tell just based on the way that they're expanding, and I'm looking for various, just like the evenness of the expansion. It's actually pretty good overall. Keep in mind the messy inclusions on the inside create some weakening of the dough, so I'm seeing a little bit of cratering in some of these, and that's just where the inclusion layers go. And so the ones that we were forming were really making sure to incorporate well with all those folds. Some of these I can tell probably the inclusion will be thicker, which will be a really nice bread. All of this analysis over the top, like little things that no one else cares about or notices in their bread, but we're trying to find those like 2 or 3 percentage points that we can improve always. So we never really look at our work as, oh yeah, we're content with exactly where we're at. We're done improving. There's always something to be done. There's always some next layer of improvement to be had. So we'll let these go. This one still has 4 minutes to go before I do that same type of steam release. So we have a little bit of time yet. The top is getting closer. These are getting very close now. I'd actually say the 3 minutes they have left might be a little bit too much, and I might be able to reduce here by a minute or two. I'm going to go ahead and start pulling them though. I usually pull from left to right in this oven because the left is the hottest part of the oven. This gochujang smells really good. With the roasted garlic and green onions, like I've been saying, it has a weird like pizza quality to it, even though it has nothing to do with pizza. Beautiful color, you can see just a contrast. Sometimes I like to do this where you can put two loaves together so you can see just the difference in color that paste will provide, working it slowly in like we've been doing all day. At the end you have this striking contrast, yet the dough started identical in the beginning out of the mixer, identical. By the end of it, you've worked in that gochujang and all the inclusions so well that it looks like they're just a part of the dough, even though the whole way, all through the table, you guys saw the evidence of just the mess that this loaf leaves. By the time that you eat it, you can't tell how much of it went into working with it.